Hi, and welcome to Talking Stand Firm. I'm your host, Cherrilynn Bisbano. Are you obligated to anything? What is your assignment? Well, Jesus had an assignment, and it was about the Great Commission. His assignment for us was the Great Commission. So, Jake, come talk to us about this. Talk to us about why Jesus felt obligated for his assignment and kind of pass that assignment on to us.
Well, we've been working on it, hadn't we?
Yeah.
The last 2.5 months, we have been working on encouraging you to march on. And this is our last Talking Stand Firm guest that we'll have on Marching On for this time period. We're going to be hitting this ongoing.
I'm
because
looking
it's
forward to her.
Oh, my goodness. I'm so excited about this opportunity to speak with Stephanie Quick of Frontier Alliance International, FAI. I know many of you are familiar with FAI. You're familiar with her. But we're going to be talking about the worth and the value of living your life on mission. And just super stoked about this opportunity.
People don't want to miss this. They do not want to miss this.
Not at all. But yeah, so last night, so next Thursday, we'll wrap up the teaching on Thursday night as we'll have lessons looking back over the past 2.5 months. But last night talked about Great Commission leverage. And I gotta say, a week ago, I had it, or this week, had an email go out. Our emails would go out on Monday, our navigational truth. It talked about how my sermon was ruined. How that,
I know. What a great. How did he ruin his own sermon? How did
the Bible ruined it?
Though I loved it.
The Bible absolutely ruined it, because so many times we just roll with what we just have been told, and we don't just read it. And a pastor of over 20 years. It is a passage. I was teaching from Matthew 13, the parable of the wheat and weeds, or wheat and tares. And I've always heard it taught that it's talking about in the church. And I've heard it used so many times of pastors talking against stand firm. They're like, Jake, you don't need to encourage people, to hold on. That's just the way it is. You've got wheat, we're going to hang in there. You got the weeds, you're going to, not hang in there and not stand firm. Well, it clearly says in the text, it's the world. It's just explaining the world that we have believers. We have, those who believe, who are made righteous through Christ, and the unrighteous, all intertwined there. And so it totally messed up my sermon. But it actually ended up being more impactful as we talked about the truth. Well, I had a similar thing happen in preparing for what I taught last night. And so I wanted to teach on the leverage that we have in the West. You mentioned John 9, where Jesus said, hey, work now, because night is coming where we can no longer work. And we know that, especially here, you who are following events of the end times and Bible prophecy, there's going to be a nightfall. For us individually,
about daylight savings time.
No, we're not. No, which has made this show today so difficult, as we were dealing with 4 time zones, setting it up. But yeah, I mean, but we're talking about, of course, the end of the age. Ultimately, that's what he's talking about. But individually, it's the end of our lives. But one of the things that I think we should take from this COVID experience is it limited during the time, and probably always to some degree is going to limit what we could have done in America as far as sharing the gospel. The lockdowns with travel, we had missionaries being brought back home. I mean, just so many different things. I think we should probably, biblically, prophetically, that a Middle Eastern power is going to rise, and therefore at least America is going to diminish, which is likely going to be socioeconomics, in our pocketbooks and all that stuff. So right now, the United States is the leader in sending out missionaries into the world, the leader in funding missions. And so we're talking about, hey, we need to leverage this freedom, leverage this wealth, leverage the opportunity while we can for the gospel. But in preparing, as I was looking at the figures for that, my heart was, I just got a punch in the gut. When you compare, and if you saw the teaching last night, you saw this. If you compare the amount of money in all Christian giving to what goes to the unreached people group, if you compare the manpower that goes to, working within Christianity to unreached, who's going to unreached people groups, it is absurd. And so to sit here and say, don't, while you can leverage it, We ain't leveraging it. We're doing good stuff. We're doing Christian stuff, but we're not going to the front lines. We're not sending much money at all. I mean, we're just a drop. Oh, and just I just got to go. I know we were like too soon into the show to go to this, but I just got to share these numbers in case you missed it last night. Listen to this. This is amazing. Worldwide, if you take church members' income estimated at $42 trillion.
Oh, wow.
Just think what you could do with $42 trillion, for evangelicals, that's $7 trillion. So still a good chunk of change in our neck of the woods. And I don't even know, when you talk trillions and billions, I don't even understand that stuff. Out of that income, 700 billion is what's given. And so it's not even approaching 10%. I don't
And you
think.
think of what Jesus did with the loaves and the fishes.
Yeah. If we hand him, what could he do with 700 billion? But then this to missions. So we're not even approaching the 10% mark and overall just giving to Christian causes. Within missions, 45 billion, and it sounds like a lot, but it's only 6.4% of all money given in Christian causes. So that means the Great Commission overall, we're only committing 6.4% of the funds available within Christianity. And listen, that's
not even a tithe. That's not even a tithe.
No, it's not. And just to go even further, when you break it down to unreached people groups, the amount of money that goes of that 6.4 of the total giving to missions, the 6.4%, only 0.3% goes to unreached people groups. They had this stat. Americans have spent more money buying Halloween costume for their pets than the amount that's given internationally to reach the unreached people.
We need to hear it like that, because I don't dress my
I didn't know
for Halloween, but
well, we did dress our dog. I didn't dress my dog. I just want to be on record. That was not my idea. That our dogs, our Beagle Charlie would be super dog. That was not my idea.
Paul says, give what your heart. Paul says to give what's on your heart to give. So if you're giving what God wants you to give, and you have some extra to dress your dog, then go for it.
It was not elaborate by any means, but yeah. So listen. Another comparison to this is so this is coming from the traveling team. And if you've not checked out the traveling team, I learned about the 1040 window from the travel team in 2000 at a conference. Mission Group is actually up here where I'm at, Northwest Arkansas is their headquarters. But so you can go to thetravelingteam.org/stats, and you can find what I'm stealing here. But some observations I had: evangelical Christians could provide all of the funds needed to plant a church in each of the 6,900 unreached people groups with only 0.03% of their income. The church has roughly 3,000 times the financial resources and 9,000 times the manpower needed to finish the Great Commission. If every evangelical gave 10% of their income to missions, we could easily support 2 million new missionaries.
I'm being convicted.
I am just punched in the gut. And then when we talk about people, you talk about the amount of missionaries in the world, only 3.3% of all missionaries are with the unreached people group.
But see, aren't we all missionaries? The Great Commission is we're all missionaries.
Yes, that's what we. Yes,
people, you're a missionary, and they're like, "No, I'm not." I said, "Yes, you are." God's mission for you is to go into all the world, Judea, Samaria, and the outermost parts. Judea is your family, your backyard, and live for Christ, be a light. And if you don't know how to give the gospel, point them to people who do until you learn. I'm
And just
sorry,
tell your
I feel
story.
like I'm preaching, but that's
No, we are preaching. We're tag teaming this because it was just a punch in the gut. I know if you watched last night, you're like, well, we heard this last night, like you're saying again, but it punched me in my gut. I mean, I was studying this late at night, and I just again, it ruined my plan. I just was like, we're doing so good, we just need to leverage it more. No, we're not doing squat. We need to get started doing. And if you've been a part of this March On series, one of the things we started with is the revival versus remnant. And the idea is, I think we have in our mind that there's just going to be this great awakening type, thousands come to the Lord just like a snap of the finger there at the end. And so we can kick up our heels until then. But no, I mean, the Great Commission is going to be fulfilled. The gospel is going to go to all of these people groups. I don't know if the Lord's divided it how the Joshua Project has divided it up, which shows us 11,000 something people groups, and we've reached there's 6,900 remaining. So we're even less, we're just kind of right at the halfway mark. So, I don't know if the Lord sees the final product as how we're drawing it up, but it's going to happen, and it's going to happen by you and me being involved.
If we're blessed to be a part of it, like you said last week, be willing to go wherever God wants you to go. And then if he says, like Africa or South America or China or whatever, be willing to go far and let God tell you where, if you're going to stay near or far. I think I'm paraphrasing what you said. But.
Well, you probably said it better than I did. And let me give us another punch in the gut. When we look at nations sending, so there's 200,000 missionaries sent out. The United States is sending out 127,000 of those.
Wow.
Brazil coming at number 2. But we're like number 9, like per capita believer going to the mission field. So it's a lot of nations really kicking our tail as far as sending out more people per believer. But sitting in like one of the top places missionaries are being sent from other places in the world, sent to the United States. Over 20,000 missionaries sent to the United States from foreign fields. That should wake us up.
Yes.
That should be a slap in the face. That
didn't start happening. That's been going on for a while. So we want to get our guest on in about 10 minutes. So tell us about this thing with Jesus saying he's come to do the works of God before night comes.
Yeah, well, and I we look at it, and you were talking about the context earlier before we came on. It's him healing the blind man, which if you want to catch, which you talk to me about, how interesting a play of words that is, talking about the blind man coming to see and then talking about nightfall coming. But the Lord had a mission. He had a mission, and he had a time frame, and then he's telling us as his followers, we do have a mission, and we have a time frame, and that time individually. And it's not just the end of our lives. Something can happen to us physically, and us unable to do it how we would dream up doing it. Now, listen, until your last breath, you can find a way to participate in the Great Commission. You bloom where you're at. But let's dream a dream for the Lord and go for it. He'll tell you, no, like he did David with the temple. Like, that's a great idea, but I don't want you to do it.
You got blood on your hands, so you can't do it. So your son Solomon. What I loved about this was in the middle of Jesus healing a blind man, the blind man came to him, and people said, and the disciples asked, who sinned? And Jesus said, he came to do the work of his Father during the day until the night comes. Or you have the exact verse there. And then he picks up the mud and he heals the blind man. And isn't that the way it is with all of us spiritually before we come to know Jesus? We're blinded, and the light of his love and his healing ignites our spirit so that we can accept him as Savior. But pretty soon we're not going to be able to do this anymore.
Yeah,
Because the
no.
Great Commission, and it's a physical analogy and it's a spiritual analogy. And Jesus said he is obligated to do this, that this is his assignment. And we were talking about that. And he gave us the assignment to go into the dark world and spread the light until the darkness comes again. And that's what we need to do. Jesus
Yeah.
was the light. We're supposed to be little Christians around here. So, and he said, let your light shine so before men, so they see the good works of your Father and so they see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. It's all about glorifying God. It's not about building church buildings that are $1 million so we can collect in a building and sing praises to God and then go home and do whatever we want. No, it's about spreading the good news. And, I'm preaching to myself.
Well, no, and if you've been watching the last 2.5 months, if not, you need to go back and check out the series with our guests. One of the things that we've been doing, and listen, I love church. I
do too.
I grew up in church. I was there every time. I've heard people say I was there every time the doors were open. No, I was there when they were closed. It's my dad did a lot of the construction work and maintenance work in the church I grew up in, and as a family for a while, we cleaned the church, lost all hope in humanity. Be doing that, but I mean, but during that time, it was such a beautiful thing because I just fell in love with just the church. But ultimately, it's the connection with the Lord. I mean, it's the work of the Lord. The church is, and I hope something that you've heard is, individually we have this mission in this Great Commission. Collectively, as a church, it's not the building. It's not about getting somebody to the building. It's about us leaning on one another and helping each other, do this. But and so we've relegated it to the pastor or the professional ministers being the ones that get to help share with someone who's blind, and the blinders come off and they get to see, as you use that illustration there. But it's all of us, every one of us. And
we had a church.
Yeah, and I had a beautiful time. I've been chronicling a bit of our story locally, as this is not just something I'm just saying in theory. This is something we're trying to do within my own church locally, as we're trying to, take the church to people. We're trying to be disciple makers. Like, if we're gonna serve somewhere at church, let's serve where we're supposed to in disciple making.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's we're working through it. So I'm meeting with our leaders, are leading these missional groups, and they've. It's so awesome because they've been so faithful to walk through this and step out and do something they haven't done before. And they're doing such a tremendous job. But we're talking about just the response, the heaviness of this responsibility as you're working with someone. And just one thing that I wanted them to hear, and I want you to hear out there today, if you're viewing, you are equipped to do this. The Lord will use you. Listen, if he will use me, he can use anybody. I mean, he's slowly walked me into this. I can't do the math now, but over 20 years that I've got to be a part of ministry, and it's been a journey, and he can do that same journey within you. Yes. And listen, I mean, you're gifted in ways that I'm not, that, our guest, I mean, we've got Stephanie, who's doing amazing work in the Middle East, is going to be on here today, doing amazing things. I think of her as a rock star in the Great Commission, but at the same time, you're more gifted.
Yeah, Jesus.
So many doing things. Yeah,
Jesus discipled the disciples, we call them, but they were fishermen. Yeah. They were tax collectors. And so we need to use that model, how Jesus discipled them, raised them up. They discipled other people. I mean, the Apostle John discipled Polycarp, who was the bishop. And he discipled him so well that Polycarp died he died for the Lord. So, I mean, that's the love of Christ that they passed down along with the teaching. It's something that we need to do as well. And we either need to be discipling or being discipled, or both.
Yeah. And I've shared this, I think last episode, or we pre-recorded the upcoming on November the 19th because of conflicts with the guest timing, and we wanted to make sure to have this guest on, Darren Huckey, by the way, who's going to be talking about Hanukkah. Just a tremendous, we did that previously, so I'm so confused when I talked about this. But in Matthew 13, we have the parable of the mustard seed, and it's not the one where you have enough faith as a mustard seed, you can speak to this mountain and be thrown in the sea. But it's when Jesus says that, he says the kingdom's like this. It's like the mustard seed, one of the smallest seeds. If you plant it in a garden, years comes by and it's going to become one of the largest trees within that garden, and its birds will land in its branches. And ultimately, I think he's talking about the spread of the kingdom. But also, yes. I mean, it can also be a picture of our life, how just that little mustard seed of faith of you stepping out. And as every yes. guest has said, when we talk about how can I go from the spiritual couch to making disciples, I said, just have conversations, just talk to people. That little mustard seed, and you can grow. Yes. And I think I've talked some about this again. I just keep going back to, because I'm trying to live this personally.
Me too.
And our church locally, we started these groups, and we've got leaders who are running with it, doing a phenomenal job. And I had an opportunity just to meet someone locally. I mean, here in the where I'm at, nearby, and they were looking at a home church type movement. And I just got to share our hearts. We got together, total strangers. We met, and then we brought our families together, and they began hosting just a home Bible study. And they asked me the opportunity to come share this Discovery Bible study there. And so just this little seed of a conversation, and the stepping out will do it. And then we've got, come first night, full house of nearly 20 folks, 8 kids, and just this home group out of nowhere.
So awesome.
And it's like that parable. I mean, if you just take that little seed of obedience in that step.
God blesses obedience. So, Jake, do we have a few shout outs before we bring our guest on?
Yeah, we probably do. I don't have the notes before me where to go. But we do we do want to hear from you. What you said was important. And we really want to hear in this conversation too about marching on. I mean, yes. we would love to hear from your feedback as well with that. So yeah, I totally dropped the ball on that. Don't have my notes in front of me.
No, that's all right. Our guest will make up for that. Our guest that's coming on. We are so excited for her.
No doubt. And I don't even want to keep us waiting. So I'm so excited about this interview we're having with Stephanie Quick. Many of you again, she's with FAI. Many of you follow FAI, and I know she's been there since the beginning. And I think of that mustard seed illustration that you step out on faith and what the Lord does. And hey, we could talk about that with Talking Stand Firm. I mean, you remember how this started was Cherrilynn called me. She's a writer and was working on several projects and working with others on several projects, and just had a conversation. What's prophetically in the word? What's going to happen? And then kind of calling projects accordingly. And we're like, well, let's just have this conversation while others can have it. And now, just amazing. Looking a little bit at the stats, within the first week of an episode, we'll have 4,500 or so folks view this, and on the different channels, and it just goes from there. David, who's working behind the scenes, is posting daily. And so if you follow Stand Firm on Facebook, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll find these just 1 minute, 2 minute clips of highlights, and I encourage you. So that's an opportunity for you to share with someone, because I think if you're here, the Lord's working in you. You see things coming down the pipe, and you see it in the word. And not only do you want to see people come to the Lord, but you also want to see believers be prepared. And we're trying to put content out there that helps you do that. And, hey, so how this thing works is, of course, we teach on Thursday nights. I try to stay within 25 minutes. They tend to be 26 or 27, but hey, we're getting there. And then we talk about it here on Fridays as we take questions from you, and we haven't even got to comments today.
That's what I was saying, the shout outs, because our guest is coming on, and we wanted to spend a lot of time. Hey, if you have them up, just give a few real quick.
Yeah, well, I want to make sure I get this in, because our guest I see is in the green room, and I want to make sure we get them on. But yeah, so get the comments in, and but so we have a chance. We want to discuss it, break it down, and then we have a guest speak on it. And so I look at it as a 360 view on a topic that we've taught from the Word. We've tried to break it down and fix where we got it wrong. We're hearing from someone who knows what they're talking about on that, and so we're trying to do that 360. And so we do that on Fridays, and then Saturday, David has it where just the interview drops, and so that's something you could share out as well. And then we're running those clips throughout the week. So those clips will be perfect for you to share to help others prepare. And so if you haven't, go over to our Facebook page and Stand Firm. If you're over on YouTube, go subscribe. That helps others
and tell
see
your
it.
friends about Stand Firm. We're not here about being we're not here to tell you what we know. We're here to help you grow. Hey, that kind of rhymed.
Yeah, write it down. Mark the tape. And we're trying to be like the airplane air mask that, they always say, hey, you get your, air pressure drops in the cabin. These things are going to automatically fall out. I can't imagine that working perfectly every time. But anyway, so it's put yours on, and that's what you've been doing. You watching this, you're putting yours on. But let's help somebody else. And you could do that simply by sharing these clips and liking and subscribing. And I need to shut up because we want to hear from Stephanie. So I am super excited about this interview. We're almost to our 70th episode.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're at 66. So that's one over 65. So you can begin saying 70, right?
Yeah.
Always, that's as my sister told me, it's preacher math. You just like estimate quite a bit. So when I was in Bible college, my sister said, Jake, you probably don't have any real math classes. They just probably put a bunch of kids in a room and run around. You got to count them and then add like 100 to whatever number you count or something, isn't it? So preacher math. So anyway, super stoked about. I mean, we've had some great guests,
yes.
But I have really just been excited about having our guest on, Stephanie Quick, and we were wrapping up our March On series.
Yes.
And so we've been for the past 2.5 months. Much of our focus is on eschatology, on the return of Christ, the challenges we're going to face with our faith and standing firm. But as we've shared over and over these past 2.5 months, hearing well done, my good and faithful servant. Standing firm is not just standing firm. It's not just making this decision to take a bold stance and not give up. But it's also marching on. It's participating in the Great Commission.
Yes.
I mean, and so we've hammered that. But I was hoping that we could close that out with Stephanie because so many times I've ran across articles and work that she's done talking about a message and a mission worth our lives. And so I'm looking forward to having that conversation. She's here in the virtual green room. And so we have, this is a miracle that this is happening. We're coming at you from 4 time zones, one of them international, but we're making it happen. And so, hey, I'm taking up time. Cherrilynn, why don't you tell about our guest and we'll bring her in.
Oh, yes. Stephanie Quick is a writer and producer serving with Frontier Alliance International. She lives in the Golan Heights and is the founder of A Walking Mirrors and co-hosts the Better Beautiful podcast, along with FAI director Jeff Henderson. I'm so excited that Stephanie's here. I can't wait to hear about some of the examples that inspire her, and bring Stephanie on. Let's get this party going. I really want to hear from her. Hi, Stephanie.
Hey, all. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for doing this and helping us make it work out. It's been of course trying to get it happening. And so we shared a little bit about what you do in your bio, but I know if I tried to, I've been having a hard time just wrapping my mind around all that you do. And so that I don't butcher it anymore, can you tell us what you do?
Yeah, I think so I've been with Frontier Alliance International since the beginning, back when we could fit the whole organization in a small minivan, and so when you're pioneering something, you wear a lot of hats, you do a lot of things. So FAI has 3 mandates that we've been laboring to build and prioritize for the last 10 years. International recruitment and advocacy, regional training and mobilization, all 4 local evangelism and discipleship. And so international recruitment and advocacy almost always necessitates media because we're in the 21st century. So most of my my job description or things that I bear responsibility for or have borne responsibility for in the past are in the international bucket, but it's a mixed bag.
Well, I know many of the people viewing keep up with you and keep up with Frontier Alliance International. I mean, when you talk about media, you guys do a tremendous job. You also have founded Walking Mirrors. I've caught some of your podcast episodes on that, and you're doing one of the best jobs I see, bringing creativity and artistry. And Cherrilynn, I've got to get you hooked up with this, because this show actually began with Cherrylynn's a writer, and she called me one day and said, "Hey, Jake, with the things coming up prophetically and these things, I'm not sure if some of these projects are projects I should be doing." And she said, "Let's have a conversation about that." And then that conversation said, we ought to do that where other people can hear more about it. And so that's where all this came from. But so Cherrilynn, you've got to check this out. But I mean, talk a bit about just the creativity aspect and the artistry that I think you're connecting with mission.
Well, I was really encouraged and provoked by the earliest example that I've found in Scripture for creativity in the arts is in the Exodus, and the Lord has led the Israelites out of Egypt. They're in the wilderness, and He's given the blueprints for the tabernacle to Moses, and He says, "I've actually appointed Bezalel and Aholiab as artists." He said, "I've poured my spirit out on Bezalel, and I've anointed Aholiab to help Bezalel to be like, this is a team that I've built." And who knows what they were doing in slavery in Egypt. We don't know if they were like standard bricklayers or if it was like they just had God-given skills that came forth, and maybe Egyptian powers that be were like, "Hey, we're going to pull you into this department." And it was actually a way where the Lord could sharpen their skill set somehow, because in the wilderness, they had what they needed as artisans, and they were, quote, gifted as artisans by the Lord, which means it's a priority for the Lord to have craftsmen and artisans to build the tabernacle. So when the Lord, first told Abraham, "You're going to have kids, they're going to go into slavery for 4 centuries, and then when they come out, they're going to plunder the nation that enslaved them." And they did, as they left the Exodus. 400 years later, all of this comes to pass. They plundered Egypt. So they have all those just buckets of gold and jewels and whatever, fabrics. And, this is, the Exodus broke the back of the strongest nation on the earth at that time, and transferred the wealth to this burgeoning nation. Even now in Israel, every year when we have Pesach, it's remembering the birth of the nation. And in that time, in this transitional generation, the Lord prioritized building something beautiful and anointed artisans and craftsmen to build something beautiful for the nation to encounter and experience the Lord in the context of what He was doing in that generation. And so I think, an example that we hear a lot is the word of the Lord in Isaiah's generation was, "Say in Jerusalem, I'll deliver you." The word of the Lord in Jeremiah's generation was, "Flee Jerusalem, I will not deliver you. You're going into exile." So I think having the discernment to know the word of the Lord endures forever, broad strokes. The word of the Lord specifically in a generation can be different than what your grandfather quoted, than what he said to your grandparents. And so we need to be able to look at where we are in the, redemptive thread of God's eternal purposes. What is the Spirit saying to the churches in this hour, in this generation? And what do we need to build for our nations and our communities and our families to encounter and behold the Lord in this time? And I don't think that that's limited to artists and craftsmen, but I do think that there is something, there's a very unique dignity that the Lord has given to creatives and to artists. Therefore, a almost burdensome responsibility that, frankly, I think we squander more than we leverage. So Walking Mirrors is really just a resource stream. It might only ever be a podcast. It might grow to something beyond a podcast or articles, but just something to begin to articulate values that call artists and creatives higher than I think what we've been doing now.
Yeah. Oh, and it's tremendous. And we're off script. And so that didn't take long. We right off, we went off script. That wasn't in the plan. But as I was praying and praying about it this morning, I feel like when we talk about getting in the Great Commission, I think a lot of times, sometimes we have aspects where we kind of can, I guess, kind of make excuses for us not to do certain things.
Mm-hmm.
But but at the same time, there's also different giftings and different aspects that we can bring into that sometimes we don't think that we can bring into that. I know growing up in church, when I first started in ministry, it was, I felt like a creative person and wasn't able to use that. And I had the opportunity to intern under a pastor who was very creative, and it really unlocked me to be able to bring some of that into ministry. And it was huge, but I had to have somebody invite me into that, like in a sense. And I think as we're talking about our roles and participating, I mean, I hope people out there listening and watching this can hear that your gifting has a purpose. I mean, God didn't give you that by accident, but it can be used for his cause, which is what you're doing with Walking Mirrors.
I do hope.
Yeah,
I'm going to start listening, because I really do feel that creativity is to glorify our Creator. And look what he did at the beginning. He created.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, I mean,
and he said it was, when he created us, he said it was very good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Stephanie, we've been focused here on hearing, well done, my good and faithful servant, and talking about not just standing firm, but also being on mission, participating in the Great Commission, making disciples. You're doing this on the front line in what many would seem to be a dangerous place. You've written a lot about the spread of the gospel being worth our lives. Others say it, but I think it means more for someone who's doing it, who's where you're at. And could you share why you've devoted your life the way you have, and how disciple making is worth all of our lives?
Yes.
I don't mean this in a trite way, but really, I encountered the Lord in college in a way that, like, the conversation that Jesus has with the disciples, and like he does the thing where he feeds the crowds, and sorry, one of my Bluetooth things just disconnected, freaked me out, but y'all can still hear me, yeah?
Yes.
But he's just fed the crowds, and they're following him because they're hungry, and he does cool things and provides for them, and then he stopped. He's like, "Look, you wanna roll with me? You got to eat my flesh and drink my blood." And then they're all like, "Okay, you just got weird. Like, you just went from like cool to cult leader, and we're not following you anymore." And the disciples are like, he turns to them and he goes, "Are you guys gonna bail too?" And they're like, Peter goes, "What else are we gonna do? You have the words of life. Like, we've burned all of our bridges." She says, "We have nothing left." And that's kind of what happened to me. But to be honest, I thought I was going to end up somewhere like Nashville with a studio. I did not see myself in the Middle East, but it was like I had breadcrumbs in front of me on the path of obedience, and I would go to one breadcrumb at a time. And then one day I was waking up in Iraq during the ISIS years, like, how did this happen to me?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And I say it all the time. It's like when you just step out in obedience, the Lord will lead you to an epic life. I mean, we may not be something we may write a book about, but I mean, you're going to experience life unlike anywhere else. And I mean, you definitely sounds like you've done that with the journey you've been on.
Yeah. One of the dads in the FAI ecosystem says, like, when he was kind of choosing what he's going to do with his life, he thought, I wanted to give myself to something that's eternal. And now it's still what drives him. And he said, that's the word of God and the souls of man. So, this could be anywhere that you are. The Lord's like agenda in this age is to exalt and elevate the name and worth of Jesus. If the Son of Man is lifted up, then he draws all men to himself. It's not that he's like a narcissist that needs to be stared at. It's that this draws all men to himself. All men. Yes. I don't care if you're in Iowa or Istanbul or Azerbaijan. All men everywhere exalt the Son of Man. And so, that doesn't. I think that there are strategic ways to do that, and I think that there are stupid ways to do that. I also know that the message is better and more important than the messenger. And even, this is why Paul could say from jail in Rome or whatever, when he was writing to the Philippians. Like, look, I understand that these guys are preaching the gospel out of ego and
Yep.
selfish ambition, but at the end of the day, the gospel is getting preached. You know?
Yep.
But he could say to the Galatians, look, those guys aren't preaching the gospel to you. If I came back and told you something else, you could curse them, curse me, curse an angel of light. That gives you a different message. So the priority is the message. And
Yes.
God can breathe on weakness. And thank God that he breathes on weakness. But, you know, for some people, that means that you're in the Middle East. For other people, it means you're in the Midwest. Whatever. Go ye therefore and teach men to obey all that I've commanded you.
I love what you
David,
said.
mark the tape.
God
you can do it
breathes on
strategically or
weakness.
stupidly. Mark the tape.
God breathes on weakness. I love that because he created out of dirt. He breathed on dirt. And that just, you gave me the chills. I'm going to quote you. God breathes on weakness. I just, yes. And Paul
you quote that, you know, the very, like, the great one liner, but I'm sticking with the strategic versus stupid.
You just look at his creation, and
I'm here all week.
I mean, he uses his creation. I mean, that's Paul knew that. And, you know, when I am weak, he is strong. He breathes on weakness.
No,
thank you.
Tremendous.
We both got something different out of that, but that was that's beautiful.
No, I got both of it. So, you know, Stephanie, some of the work that you've done. I mean, I know you produced the film The Frontier. I've seen you write and talk a lot about Hudson Taylor. What are some historical examples that have motivated you to follow these breadcrumbs to end up where you're at?
You know, in the early days of FAI, I was reading a ton of biographies because I was kind of like, what did I just get myself into? And the first one that I read, not at the sort of start of that bend in the journey, was St. Patrick's autobiography. And he was reflecting on the time that, you know, so this is a kid who's born into wealth and affluence. He's exposed to the church, whether like his dad and his grandfather were like elders or bishops or something. And it could have been for a tax break. It could have been sincere, but he's exposed. He describes himself as a godless 14-year-old pagan. And he's kidnapped by Irish pirates, taken to Ireland, forced into slavery on a farm for upwards of 6 years. So now he's a young man. But in that time, he developed started to call him, and you know, so they nicknamed him Holy Boy, kind of as a derogatory thing, but he was known as like the kid who's often he's a David on the back hills of Bethlehem praying. And then one night he has a dream. The Lord gets him home. He goes back home. He sees his parents again. They think he's dead, so they're like weeping. You know, like you won't ever leave again. He's like, no, I'm not going anywhere. You know, I just got home. And then he trains for the priesthood, enters ministry, and is doing really well. He's approaching what we would call middle age, but it's, you know, this is like the 4th century or 5th century. So the life expectancy is not super long. And he has a dream effectively wherein the Lord is calling him to go preach the gospel in Ireland, to go back to the land of his oppression and slavery and serve his enemies with the gospel, because the gospel had stopped at the Irish Sea. Nobody was going beyond Great Britain. The Roman Empire stopped because they thought the Irish are barbarians. You know, they can't read. They're just violent. They're not even worth it. So who does that sound like on our maps nowadays? And they didn't think that it was a worthy enterprise. And he made a list of pros and cons. Like, here are all of the reasons why I will never go back to Ireland and I will never leave my home again. Like, his education was aborted. He was always a little bit insecure about being a bit illiterate, and he needed it, you know, to be able to teach the Bible. Why would I go back to this place? And he said, but then he wrote down, you know, reasons to go to Ireland. He said, I had all these reasons to stay in, you know, Scotland or whatever. And I had no reason to go save for the gospel and God's promises. And it outweighed everything. Wow. And then I encountered John G. Payton's autobiography as well. And he had been, he was alive in Scotland in the 1800s. And when he was in college, like 19, 20 years old, 2 guys were martyred in Erromango in the chain of what is now Vanuatu. And as word traveled, they were speared, eaten, cannibalized. And so word gets back to Britain and the London Missionary Society and stuff, and the effort in the South Pacific dries up within single-digit years. Nobody wants to get cannibalized. So Peyton's burdened. He said, Christ has now baptized those islands with the blood of his martyrs, thereby declaring to the whole Christian world that he has claimed them as his own. Not even to the world, to the Christian world. And he was like, God has an inheritance there, and it's our job to go harvest it. And nobody's going to do that if you stay here like a coward. So he starts saying, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to Erromango. He's got a thriving youth ministry in the inner city of Glasgow. So he's like, I have a cush job. I could stay. It's worthy work. It's good work to do. But if I leave here, 40 young men will line up and take my place, but nobody is going to Erromango. So he starts to announce, I'm going to go back to Erromango. And everybody's like, his family, interestingly, is like Hudson Taylor's parents. They're like, actually, before we got pregnant with you, we asked the Lord for a son and committed you to ministry and committed you to the field. We just didn't tell you that. We've just been praying to that end your whole life. And that same thing, that same conversation happened with Hudson Taylor and his parents, because they wanted to go to China and couldn't. So they said, Lord, give us a son. We'll commit him to China. And so Peyton starts to say, I'm going to go to Erromango. Everybody except his parents oppose him. And this older gentleman in his, church context, ministry context, would just berate him and argue with him to discourage him from doing it. And he never really had, he tried to like have his points and talk him out of it. But anytime, Peyton's not budging, he's going. So things are beginning to escalate emotionally. And at one point, this older gentleman erupts and he goes, but the cannibals, Peyton, if you go, you will be eaten by cannibals. And Peyton, God bless him, looks at him and says, Mr. Dixon, you are old and advanced in years, and soon your own prospect will be laid in the grave, there to be eaten by worms. And whether I'm eaten by worms or by cannibals, you and I are going to be raised to the same degree of glory in the day of the resurrection.
Oh, wow.
So thank you, sir. I'm going to Erromango. And he went down there for decades, and it was brutal work, but fruitful, and worthwhile. And so I thought of Peyton immediately when John Allen Chow was killed on North Sentinel Island a few years ago. And I thought, he's the seed. Christ has now baptized those islands with the blood of the martyrs, thereby declaring to the whole Christian world that he's claimed them as his own. I think it was the, like the highest gauntlet. And I think his life and death was the Lord, like, forget the world. The world, they don't, if you don't know, you don't know what you don't know. But for the church and the body of Jesus that carries that mandate, we all have the same commission. Nobody gets a hall pass to duck out of the Great Commission. I think Chow's life was leveraged in a way that the Lord would confront us with our obscene priorities. Because mostly when he died, he mostly got criticized by the church publicly. And I think the Lord was like, look, I'm super serious about this. So I want to get all y'all's attention and tell you that I am going to find these people and I am going to go after them. And if you join me, if you think I'm worth it, and if you don't, you're going to mock those who do. But the cowards don't enter the kingdom.
Wow.
Okay, there's so many tape markings there. Your highlighter's going to run out there, David. So I really began following you after I read an article you had about John Allen Chow, and I probably butchered his name there, but who was killed on North Sentinel Island, taking the gospel. And what I was shocked with is just hearing from other believers, friends, who just were like, why would he do this day and age? I mean, he knew better. I mean, why would he do that? And I mean, to me, like those historical accounts that you're talking about, I think of the Elliots, because that's probably what I'm most familiar with. This to me is what we're ultimately called to do. But I was shocked to hear the feedback of just the confusion about that. And you had written, I know written at least one article I ran across that had a good run. I mean, could you speak to that? I mean, help us understand a bit about that in this day and age. I mean, someone risking their life to that point, because I think that's something that it seems to me most believers don't equate to our call.
Right.
Yeah. I'm just realizing that was 3 years ago this month. It was November 2018.
Wow.
And, right? 18, 19.
Yeah.
As I said at the start, I'm bad at math. I can't do time zones and I can't count years.
It was 2018. So yeah, November 17th, 2018. Yes. There we go. Yeah.
When we published that article, we didn't really realize that we were wading into a snake pit until, especially because we're on this side of the Atlantic. So we go to sleep
Right.
and then we wake up in the morning, we just see Facebook and we're like, oh my word, do y'all not have a hobby? Like, and the incredible criticism that he came under immediately reminded me of Mary of Bethany pouring everything she had out on Jesus, breaking what was probably, her dowry, or like, we don't know anything about her parents. So this is probably her only financial security for the future. She busts it and pours it out over Jesus to anoint him for his burial, because she's the only one in the room who has a glimmer of revelation on what's going on. She knew that the Lord of the resurrection would himself be resurrected, and therefore the Lord of the resurrection would himself he would die. So she starts to anoint him for his death. She's, I think the penny dropped for her when he pulled Lazarus out of the tomb. And then the next time she saw him, she's probably like, I don't know what the window is, but I know I have a one shot. And I think we need that in our own lives. We have one shot, actually, YOLO. This is not reincarnation. You don't come circle back around the sun until you learn your lesson and like be a butterfly. You get one shot. And I think John felt that way and did that. And what we see in the text when she does this, I think Matthew and John, are the ones that recorded, or Luke and John. And you have to kind of stitch it together to get the whole picture. But she does this, and I think John, one of them says, and then one of the disciples said, man, why this waste? That was stupid. We could have taken this $35,000-$40,000 and like given it to the poor. The other gospel writer goes, it was actually Judas, and he didn't really care about what we could do to the poor. It's just that he was in charge of the money and he was stealing from it. So he was really mad that he just missed the opportunity to, I don't know, swipe 20 grand out of the bag or whatever. And so he is confronted with the worth of Jesus, like we were. But the problem is, Judas says this. He goes, why this waste? That was stupid. That was foolish. You dumb girl. And every apostolic leader of the future church in the room went, yeah, Judas, you're right. What a stupid thing to do. Every single one of them. And Jesus had to go, listen, she's done a good thing for me. The poor you will have with you always, which is part of the law in Deuteronomy. You will always have the poor with you. So here's the rules on how you provide whatever. He's like, I care about the poor more than you do, Judas. But she's like, guys, I have been telling you this whole time. And so Chow's death, I think, was the moment that the alabaster broke, and we turned around and saw this puddle and just heard the dripping oil, and the fragrance filled the room. And all it takes is one person on Twitter to go, why this waste? That was so stupid. And the hordes went, yeah, that's dumb. All it did was expose our offense at the worth of Jesus. We didn't actually think he was worth it. And we don't think that those people deserve the dignity of hearing about him. We don't actually think that his name is that beautiful. I don't care if pagans hear that story and get on Twitter and like yell at him for biological warfare and lob all kinds of accusations that were neither fair nor true. But I really care if there are people who confess the lordship of Jesus, who sing their songs on Sunday morning. Like Hudson Taylor said, there's thousands of people rejoicing in their own security, singing their hallelujahs, while millions are perishing for lack of knowledge, and they don't care. I think that if we're not sober by the fact that people will meet the Lord in the day of judgment and hear, I never knew you, get away from me, but Lord, I did all of these cool ministry initiatives in your name. And he goes, I never knew you. We want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. We don't want to hear, I don't know who you are.
That's powerful. We only have like a minute and a half, and
we're gonna have to go in a couple minutes of overtime because I got to get this question in, because you just opened the door of this.
Yes.
I mean, you basically told us, but let's take another round with it. What advice would you give for someone to increase their heart for the nations?
Yes.
A heart like John Allen Chow had.
I think, Mike Bickle, God love him, he says, I come to the place of prayer and I say, Holy Spirit, let me see what you see. Let me feel what you feel. eventually you're going to start to care about people around you.
Yes, yes. That's I have to say, when I started praying that myself, my heart started breaking for the lost, or my heart started breaking for my brothers and sisters who weren't standing firm, like you said, and my heart broke for the lost. And my prayer went from selfish prayers to, Lord, just give me one per day. Just give me one to talk to about you. And it's such a powerful, I mean, what I am, I'm convicted, I'm encouraged, and I've got chills by what you have said
Yeah.
today. Really,
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you so much. So much insight.
Yeah.
Well,
Isn't this, I mean, the perfect way to top off where we've spent 2.5 months talking about marching on, because how you said it. I mean, the value of Christ, the value, the dignity of others coming to know him. The teaching that aired last night was called Great Commission Leverage. I began with the process of just saying, hey, we know the Lord said night is coming, so we need to work while we can. COVID definitely showed us a night that slowed things down. And I think here in the West, there's going to come a time when, the freedom and wealth that we have, we can't no longer leverage for the kingdom. So that was the plan. But when I was studying and preparing, I saw the statistics of how much the church, I mean, the Western church, is spending locally versus to unreached people groups, the manpower. And
Yes.
we're not doing it
it's
now.
appalling.
And
Yeah.
I just have been sick. I'm still sick in my stomach from that. But it comes down to what you're saying. We saw that in the response with John Allen Childs, we said, and just seeing the value of Christ. But you also touched on having this heart for the nations. I think my heart is that we would all flip our default to, I'll go if God twists my arm, to we should desire to be on the front line, but we always need to bloom where we're at in the Great Commission. I mean,
Totally.
how could you encourage to just bloom where we're at?
Hudson Taylor, again, one of the things that's always encouraged us about him is that when he committed as a 16, 17-year-old kid to enter and pursue medical school, get a medical degree so that he could go to China, he immediately started living as though he were in China. He walked everywhere. He is like, I don't do this. If I have like a fast coming up, I feast. But he started eating a ton of rice, like just started shifting his diet so that when he got there, it wasn't as difficult, to do it. So it's a silly example, but an example, like if you're not doing it where you are, you're not going to do it on the field. So I would really encourage people, to plug in with our friends with Sheep Among Wolves. Go to sheepamongwolves.world and plug in. They're doing a ton of training in the States right now. If you're like, I want to talk to my neighbors about the Lord, but I don't know how to do that. Or like, all my friends are Christian. How do I find, like, I got really challenged years back. The leader of that group said, pull out your phone and go through your contacts and tell me how many people are not Christians. 90% should be unbelievers. And I was like, oh,
90%.
So,
whoa.
Convicted.
Yeah. And people are like, I don't know how to do it. He goes, but you go buy coffees, don't you? You go to the same gas station, don't you? You go to the same grocery store, don't you? Just start talking to people. But we go to self-checkout lanes because we don't actually want to talk to anybody.
Yes. And
listen, I'll say this, and then you guys can shut me up and let me go. The early criticism of the second wave of the missions movement, just before Hudson Taylor and William Carey, because they shifted this, was that in the days of colonialism and imperialism, these empires and geopolitical powers took the Great Commission and exploited it they couched it in colonialism to get away with what they were doing, to sanctify what they were doing. And so Hudson Taylor came on the scene and he was like, you're not coming here to teach these Chinese people how to be English. That's ridiculous. Right. You want to live here, you wear their clothes, you learn their language, you eat their food, and you get away from your little bubbles and your colonies on the coastland. If you're going to live in China, live in China. If you're going to live in England, live in England. And so I think I look at, the state today, the church today, that I get like gather together corporately, worship, pray, fast, fellowship, all of these things. Like I hear all of these things. I care deeply about there being an expression of the community and fellowship of disciples everywhere. So I'm not saying be a lone ranger, but I am saying if I hear somebody go, yeah, I just quote do life and run with these people who all believe exactly the same thing that I do, and if the Lord showed up at the foot of your bed tonight and said, who are you discipling? You go, oh, well, so and so. You go, cool. He already obeys me. So what exactly do you think you have to offer? Like, you're not obeying me. Go teach somebody everything I have commanded you. I don't know anybody. Go find them. Go fishing. It's actually not that hard.
Go fishing.
Go fishing. Just don't be a jerk. Just be nice to people.
That's a great way. Oh, go fishing. Let's all go fishing. You
don't build colonies. Don't build bubbles.
We got to have you back on again.
Yeah, I mean, this has just been incredible. And it's interesting. All the interviews we've done for 2.5 months, everyone has we've kind of basically said this. Give us a practical step, and it's all been the same. Talk to somebody. Just talk to someone. Now you took it up notches ahead of time, so we're definitely, David, marking some tape there again. Well, but Stephanie, thank you so much. I know this message it's going to be challenged to hear. And you mentioned sheep among wolves. My church locally, where I pastor, we have a Zoom setup in the coming weeks.
Oh, cool.
Where me and my leaders are meeting with them and starting the process of being trained. And it's weird. Like, so we're doing the Discovery Bible, Disciple Making Movement, Discover Bible stuff here locally, trying to. And I learned it from Sheep Among Wolves, from Frontier Alliance International, and so then I'm finding Western ministries that are doing it. But one thing I'm finding is they're not doing it to disciple unto, except in Christ. It's not that. It's just doing it to do it. And so I really encourage people to check out Sheep Among Wolves and get involved with that and have that training. Stephanie, we've gone in bonus time. I thank you for giving us that bonus time.
Yes.
How can someone, you've got so much tremendous stuff, your writings, your books, your articles, your podcast, the films with FAI. Tell us how to follow you and tell us a resource or two to check out.
Everything. We have the FAI app that everything goes into the FAI app. So you can go to faimission.org, or type FAI or Frontier Alliance International, and wherever you get apps, and everything goes in there. So
I know I'm going to be listening to your podcast, and definitely. God bless you. Praying for you, and everybody join us next week. What's going on next week, Jake?
So next week we will be we have our guest on. So we're wrapping up the March On series completely. So this was our final March On guest. Thursday night I will be teaching lessons that we've learned throughout this time at March On. So several things. So I'll probably be just repeating this interview Thursday for that, and then we will come on. We'll do that again. We want to hear from you on that Friday to follow up with. And then we've got a special guest, Darren Huckey, who's going to be on talking about Hanukkah and why, as Gentiles, we should consider participating and being involved. And so, and he's got a devotional book called 8 Lights, where he walks you through doing it. So last year was my first year for my family to walk through it. And I have his devotional book manual there in front of me as I'm going through it. So just tremendous. So check it out. And it's done in time for you to experience Hanukkah as well. And so, a lot going on. We thank you for being here again. Again, each Monday, I'm trying to pour my heart into you guys and give you some navigational truth just to help you walk through this time. You can sign up for that down below in the notes wherever you're at. You can also find a link to the FAI app and other resources that's been mentioned here in the notes. Again, wherever, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're watching this. Again, thank you for being here. We'll see you next week.
I want to leave with a quote from our guest. No one gets a hall pass from the Great Commission. Think about that and pray on that. Goodbye.